Hello brothers and sisters, welcome to another episode here on Dangerous African Confessions HD. In this episode, we have this controversial and powerful conversation from our sister, who was talked to us about her service to a prophet and the secret that the prophet was hiding from the wife and the congregation that he led. I have a lot to say. But before then, let us go into today's video and I will return. Please subscribe if you haven't done so, and also do like and share this video, so others out there can also benefit from this conversation, and hit the notification bell as well, so you will be notified anytime we upload videos.
My brother, what I am going to share with you today is something that I have kept for so long. I decided not to share with anyone. And based on our agreement, I would like to pen up about my experience with the prophet and his family. I quite remember when I first stepped into that church, so full of life, with people swaying, hands raised, lost in the music and the presence of God. I was just a young girl, barely 20, trying to find my place in the world. I had just moved to the city with my friend and her mother, living behind a life of poverty and uncertainty. My mother had always said that God would guide me, but I wasn't sure what that meant. I had come for the woman to help me learn a trade for myself. She had promised my mother about that. Then I met them, the prophet and his wife. They were more than just spiritual leaders to the congregation. It was the same church that my friend and her mother attend. To us, the pastor and his wife were divine embodiments of grace and wisdom. The prophet, with his booming voice and piercing gaze, could make the hardest hearts tremble. His wife, though soft-spoken, carried a silent strength, her eyes always holding a quiet understanding. I thought they were perfect. Not just in their roles, but as people. They seemed untouchable, almost holy, their lives a beacon for those of us who struggle to find meaning. You see, after about some time with the church, they offered me a position to serve them. I discussed with my friend's mother and we had a conversation with my mother about it. She was okay with it and so, I agreed to go and serve them in their house. When they offered me a position to serve them, the truth is that I was not going to hesitate. But I had to respect what my two mothers were going to say. It felt like my prayers had been answered, like I had found a purpose. That is how I started to live with them in their nice house that they were living in. I started small, helping with meals, organizing events, cleaning the house. Slowly, I became indispensable to them. As you can talk about prophets, he was a busy man, constantly traveling, giving sermons, healing, and performing miracles that left the congregation in awe. I had the honor of being by his side during these moments. His wife, on the other hand, gentle but firm, always had a way of making me feel at ease. She was someone you could talk to without fear of judgment, and over time, I grew to admire her as much as I did the prophet. Their home was peaceful. Or at least, I thought it was. At first, there was no sign of anything that could disturb the image of perfection they presented. The prophet was always there for the church, leading, praying, offering counsel. His wife always stood beside him, her presence calm to his intensity. I watched and served them with reverence, serving them without question. But you see, as the years went by, little things began to change. I started to notice cracks in the facade. It wasn't anything that you could point to directly. It was more of a feeling. At first, it was subtle. The prophet would disappear on certain mornings, always before Sunday services. What was strange to me was the fact that his wife never questioned him, never seemed to notice or care. I believe sometimes things happen so that you will make an informed decision about it. I remember one Sunday morning, after breakfast, I was tidying up in the kitchen when I overheard something strange. The prophet was speaking in hushed tones, his voice unfamiliar, but the words sounded intimate. I didn't know what to make of it, so I brushed it off as a fluke. But then, it happened again. And again. Every month, without fail, the prophet would disappear early in the morning, leaving the house quietly. His wife would never ask where he went, never seemed concerned. I found it odd, but I couldn't bring myself to question him. After all, he was the prophet. He was above reproach. One thing is that my brother, there was this particular morning that would haunt me forever. I had been awake early, unable to sleep for reasons I couldn't explain. As I passed by the study where the prophet usually read before service, I heard voices. At first, I thought it was just the prophet preparing for his sermon. But then, upon later voices that I heard, my stomach dropped. One voice was unmistakably his, but the other was a man's. I froze. I couldn't move. I heard the prophet laugh softly, the kind of laughter that was filled with intimacy, a closeness I had never heard before. And then I heard the man speak. His words were low, affectionate, but they were unmistakably those of someone more than a friend. My heart raced as the conversation grew more intimate. It wasn't just a meeting, it was a secret. And it was happening every month. I didn't know what to do. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I had heard. Could it really be true? Had I misunderstood? But the next time it happened, I didn't even have to overhear the conversation. You see, the moment the prophet left the house, I don't know what came over me, to be honest. I followed him, quietly, at a distance. I knew this was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. I needed answers. I watched him walk down the street, turning into a small, inconspicuous house at the corner. He knocked, and the door opened almost immediately. A man greeted him with a familiarity that sent shivers down my spine. I watched for what felt like an eternity, my breath shallow, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to scream, to run, to confront them both. But I stayed hidden, paralyzed by the truth I was starting to unravel. Every month. Like clockwork. The prophet had another life, one hidden away from everyone. And it wasn't just a fleeting affair. This was something more. And I don't know why this thing was done, at the end of every month. Exactly the last Sunday of every month, that is when he would do that. Whether it was the source of his power or not, I had no idea. But I knew it was something that he kept secret from his wife, from the congregation, from the world. I felt sick to my stomach. I returned to the house in a daze. The prophet came back, hours later, as if nothing had happened. His wife was preparing for the Sunday service, just as she always did. She never questioned him. She never seemed to suspect anything. And neither did anyone else. They were perfect, untouchable, revered. I thought about confronting him, about revealing the truth to his wife. But how could I? Who would believe me? A mere servant in their household. The prophet had so much influence. The church loved him. And his wife, she was so kind, so innocent in all of this. What would I say? That the man she loved and trusted had been living a lie. The guilt weighed on me, but I said nothing. I kept quiet. I watched, and I waited. But every time I saw him with his wife, pretending to be the perfect husband, I felt a knot form in my stomach. I was complicit in his silence, in his deception. How could I, of all people, stand by and do nothing? The months passed, each one feeling like a heavy weight on my chest. Every Sunday, I stood behind the prophet, helping with the service, organizing the choir, and making sure everything was in order. The congregation saw only what they wanted to see, the image of a perfect man of God. But I knew the truth. I carried it with me every day, and it was suffocating. Then something unexpected happened one evening. You see, the prophet and his wife were arguing. It wasn't the kind of argument you could ignore. It was raw, emotional, and heated. I had just finished preparing a meal in the kitchen when I heard them in the living room. The prophet's voice, usually so calm and authoritative, was raised in frustration. His wife, however, didn't speak with anger. She spoke quietly, but with a force that made me pause. The wife said that, "I know, I've known for a long time, but I've chosen to ignore it." I stopped in my tracks, my heart pounding in my chest. She wasn't talking about what I thought she was she? The prophet's voice faltered. That was when she dropped it. That she knows what the husband has been doing. She asked a question that shocked me. She asked him if he has been seeing him again. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The prophet was silent for a long moment, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in his carefully constructed mask. He didn't deny it. He didn't argue. All he said was that he was sorry, and he never wanted it to know. But then he again said something shocking. He told the wife that the wife can't pretend it's not true. And that he, the prophet, can't change who he is. There it was. The truth, laid bare. The prophet had not just been sneaking around with this man, he had been living two separate lives, one in the light, revered by the church and his wife, and one in the shadows, with another man. I was frozen, not knowing whether to confront them or to retreat. But I didn't need to say a word. The wife had already spoken. After their argument, there was a silence that lingered in the air. The prophet left the room, leaving his wife alone with her thoughts. It was then that I decided to speak to her. For the first time in years, I felt like I needed to know the truth from her. I found her sitting in the study, her eyes distant, staring at nothing in particular. She looked up as I entered, her expression unreadable. She asked me if I heard them arguing. This time, her voice was barely above a whisper. I nodded, unsure of what to say. My heart was heavy with the weight of what I had just learned, and I was afraid to hear more. But something in her eyes, something resigned and weary, made me believe that she had her own version of the truth to share. That day, she told me that she has known for years. She told me that it's not just that. It's everything. The lies, the secrets. She's seen it all, but she's been too afraid to confront it. To lose him, to lose everything we built together. I thought I could turn a blind eye, pretend that it didn't matter. Those were her words. And I didn't know how to respond. I felt an overwhelming mixture of sadness and sympathy for her. She was trapped in her own silence, just as I had been. For years, she had lived with this burden, knowing her husband was betraying her, and yet she had stayed. Stayed for the ministry. Stayed for the church. Stayed because she believed that somehow, everything else, the good works, the miracles, the sermons, would justify it. That was when I gathered courage to tell her that she deserves to know everything, not just pieces of it. She nodded, looking at me with a mixture of gratitude and regret. I've tried to keep the peace. I've tried to believe in the man I married. But I've lost myself in the process. Those were her words to me. You see, the next few days were a blur. The wife and I had several conversations after that, and we both realized something: this secret had eaten away at both of us. While I had felt conflicted about the truth, she had been living with the knowledge for years, hiding it behind the walls of a perfect life. She hadn't just lost her trust in her husband, she had lost herself in the process. But now that we both knew, the question was, what do we do with it? Do we expose the prophet for who he truly was? Do we break the illusion he had so carefully constructed? Would anyone even believe us? The weight of this decision was unbearable. I had spent 5 years serving this man and his wife, seeing them as my family, my guides. To expose the truth would mean betraying them. But to stay silent any longer felt like an act of complicity. I thought of my own life, my own path. I had sacrificed so much of myself for them, for this church. I had convinced myself that serving them was my purpose, that this was where God wanted me. But in reality, I had been blinded. I had been worshipping an illusion, serving a man who wasn't who he claimed to be. And so, I made the decision. My brother, and so, I left. Not just the household, but the church. I couldn't stay in a place built on lies, even if those lies were wrapped in the cloak of righteousness. The day I left, I spoke to no one. I packed my belongings quietly, left a note for the wife, and walked out the door. I never saw the prophet or his wife again. In the months that followed, I struggled with the consequences of my actions. The church went on without me, as did their marriage. The prophet continued his ministry, his secrets hidden behind the pulpit. His wife stayed by his side, no longer the naive woman I had once admired, but a woman who had chosen to live in the shadows of her own pain. But I had to find my own way. I had to rebuild my life, free from the guilt and confusion that had clouded my vision for so long. It wasn't easy, but with time, I learned to trust myself again. I learned that truth, no matter how painful, would always be my guide. Then it came to me as I reflect on those 5 years, I realized how much of my life was spent in the service of others, believing in something that wasn't true. I thought I was serving God, but in reality, I had been serving an image, a persona. I had allowed myself to be blinded by the aura of power and influence, not seeing the cracks until they became too wide to ignore. But I also realized that sometimes, the truth can be both painful and liberating. It was a truth I had to discover for myself, and it was a truth that changed the course of my life. And while I may never understand why the prophet chose to live the way he did, or why his wife chose to stay, I know this: we all have to find our own path, even if it means breaking free from the lies we've lived with for so long.
Don't forget to please subscribe, share and like our videos. Kindly hit the notification bell so you will be the first to get notification to our videos when we upload. To anyone who places their trust completely in a prophet or spiritual leader, I want to share something from the depths of my heart. The basics of your spiritual journey is in your own hands. Learn to trust your instincts and learn to hear from your Creator and Father in heaven yourself. You cannot put your life and trust into the hands of someone you don't know their true intentions. Faith is a powerful thing. It gives us hope, direction, and the strength to overcome even the darkest times. But it's important to remember that faith should never blind us to the reality of the human nature we all carry, even those we admire and look to for guidance. Prophets and spiritual leaders are humans. They may be vessels of divine inspiration, but they also have their flaws, their struggles, and their secrets. Never forget that we all are imperfect beings, regardless of the titles we hold or the image we project to others. Even the ones who stand at the pulpit, who speak words of wisdom, may falter and live lives we cannot see. The power of faith is in knowing that it is okay to question, to seek the truth, and to not allow anyone, no matter how revered, to take control of your own spiritual journey. If you are still going to trust your leader or pastor, then it is equally important to keep your eyes open and your heart grounded. Ask questions when something doesn't feel right. Listen to your intuition. Don't ignore the small, quiet whispers inside you that tell you something isn't adding up. You have the right to protect your peace and your soul. Trust isn't blind loyalty, it's the act of following someone because their actions, their words, and their life align with what they preach. When those things begin to diverge, when you witness something that makes you uncomfortable, don't silence your own voice for the sake of loyalty or fear. Your spiritual health, your peace of mind, and your understanding of who you are is too important to be compromised by anyone's image or reputation. And remember, you are not alone. If you feel lost or confused, there are always others who share similar feelings. It's okay to seek support. It's okay to step back, reflect, and decide if this is the right path for you. Finally, protect your integrity. Your relationship with your faith should be personal, direct, and real. Don't let someone else's journey overshadow your own. You are worthy of clarity, truth, and the opportunity to grow spiritually in your own way, with or without the guidance of others. It's not easy to face the truth, especially when it challenges the things we've believed in for so long. But always remember, the truth, though difficult, will set you free. It will help you grow and find your path forward, with strength and clarity. Trust in yourself first, and always remember that faith, in its truest form, is meant to elevate you, not break you. Thank you, and I will see you in the next video.